Hello there and welcome to the level 110 Outlaw Rogue guide. In this video we'll cover the Outlaw Rogue in all of its glory, covering everything you need to know to be successful in PvE combat. This guide is designed for everyone, so whether you're a new player wondering what the class is like to play, an experienced player looking to go above and beyond, or a veteran that wants to switch to a different class for Legion, this guide is for you. We'll start with basic concepts and then steadily go into more detail as the video progresses. Make sure you have annotations enabled, as this will allow you to jump between the various sections of this guide at will. The information in this guide was supplemented by Stiern's Rogue Legion Overview, a fantastic document full of great information regarding all three rogue specializations. You can find a link to this in the description. Now, let's get started.
Reinforcements be here! Ha ha!
The Outlaw Rogue is a pirate. Donning leather armor and toting the legendary Dreadblades, the Outlaw Rogue relies upon master swordsmanship, dirty tricks, a fair dose of chance, and a pistol to carve, blow up, shoot, and otherwise lay low their enemies. As a rogue, the Outlaw has access to a huge variety of defensive abilities, from reducing the damage they take to avoiding spells with a cloak of shadows to moving at a dizzying speed. The Outlaw Rogue is not only a great damage dealer, but a utilitarian powerhouse as well. Powering their abilities with a pool of rapidly regenerating energy and tying their attacks together into combos indicated by points, the Outlaw Rogue is the bane of clumped up enemies. Their Blade Flurry ability lets them painlessly switch between carving up a single enemy to slicing apart a huge clump of foes. Rolling the bones of fate for even greater power, a lucky Outlaw Rogue is a near unstoppable force of damage. As an Outlaw Rogue, you will be slicing and dicing your foes with a variety of sword strikes and pistol blasts. Let's take a look at the abilities you'll be using the most. Stealth. The hallmark of any rogue is their ability to slip into the shadows. Remaining undetectable until they get too close to a foe, they use offensive abilities, they are struck by damage, or they cancel stealth. It has a cooldown of a couple of seconds and lasts as long as the rogue would like it to. Ambush. Requiring stealth, this attack strikes a foe in melee for heavy damage, awarding 2 combo points. This has a large energy cost and no cooldown. Pistol Shot. This draws a pistol from the rogue's hip and blasts an enemy from range, dealing light damage and reducing their movement speed for a short time. This generates 1 combo point, costs a medium amount of energy, and has no cooldown. Saber Slash. This instant melee attack costs approximately half of the rogue's energy bar, viciously slashing a single foe for damage and generating a combo point. This slash has a chance to trigger a second slash, which grants another combo point and activates Opportunity, making the rogue's next pistol shot completely free. Saber Slash has no cooldown. Run Through. This is the Outlaw Rogue's main finisher, dealing damage to a single enemy based upon how many combo points are spent on it. Only 1 combo point and the rogue basically tickles their foe. At maximum combo points though, Run Through can obliterate enemies. It has a small energy cost, a short range that extends just out of melee, and no cooldown. Roll the Bones. This ability is the Outlaw Rogue's bane and blessing. When used, this finisher consumes combo points to roll the dice of fate, providing a random combat enhancement that lasts longer based upon how many combo points are spent. The buffs a rogue can get from this are Jolly Roger. This causes Saber Slash to have a much higher chance to strike a second time. Grand Melee. This hugely increases the rogue's attack speed and grants them Leech, healing them for a portion of the damage they deal. Shark-Infested Waters. This increases the rogue's critical strike chance. True Bearing. This causes finishing moves to reduce the cooldown on most other rogue abilities based upon how many combo points are spent. Buried Treasure. This increases the rogue's energy regeneration rate. And Broadsides. This causes combo point generating abilities to generate an additional combo point. Here's the thing. Roll the Bones is random. It can grant the rogue a single buff, a couple of buffs, 3 buffs, 4 buffs, 5 buffs, or, rarely, all 6 of them. The Outlaw Rogue gets increasingly powerful based upon how well they roll the bones. Blade Flurry. This is a toggled ability with a short cooldown after activating it. While active, Blade Flurry reduces the rogue's energy regeneration rate, but causes their melee attacks and abilities to also strike all nearby foes for a portion of the damage. Blade Flurry lasts as long as the rogue wants it to and has no energy cost. Adrenaline Rush. This is the Outlaw Rogue's main cooldown. When used, this doubles the rogue's energy regeneration rate and increases their attack speed for a short period. This has a long cooldown, but remember that it can be reduced by Roll the Bones. Finally, Curse of the Dreadblades. This is the Outlaw Rogue's artifact ability. When used, it invokes the power of the Dreadblades for a short period, causing each saber slash or pistol shot to completely fill the rogue's combo points. However, this comes at a price. Each time a finisher is used, the Dreadblades will deal a small amount of damage to the rogue. This has a medium cooldown, and since this isn't a rogue ability, but rather an artifact ability, it is not affected by cooldown reduction from Roll the Bones. These aren't all of the abilities you'll be using as an Outlaw Rogue, but they're the main ones you'll be using to annihilate your foes. The Outlaw Rogue is fast and ever-changing. Based upon how they roll the bones, their playstyle can change from slower, preparing big abilities for burst, or into a sudden rush of damage as they get a roll that changes the situation, causing them to suddenly surge with adrenaline and start carving their foes apart. Alongside this, the Outlaw Rogue is really tough to kill. They can mitigate and even make themselves immune to damage, they can cheat their way through an otherwise fatal strike, they can move with incredible speed, and they can even vanish completely to remove themselves from combat if things start going south.
Hey. Lights out.
To start off, all rogues wear leather armor. Although you can technically equip cloth armor, you should never, ever equip it for use in combat, as its reduced armor will lower your survivability, the stats on it won't be suitable for you, and because of a passive you have. Armor skills. This grants you a 5% increase to your primary stat if you're wearing entirely leather armor. You want this. Also important to note is the way that gear changes stats. All pieces of gear will change their primary stat dependent upon your specialization. So if, say, a balanced druid were to wear your gear, they'd gain intellect, whereas you would gain agility. Also important to note is that necklaces and rings no longer come with any primary stats other than stamina, opening up your pool of loot even more. When a piece of gear drops, it has a chance to be Warforged and Titanforged, basically increasing its item level and statistics. This bonus can occur multiple times, meaning that you can get some extremely powerful pieces of loot from doing simple tasks, like world quests. Remember though, that the baseline item level of your gear and the chance it has to be Titanforged to higher degrees will be greater if you're doing more challenging content, like mythic dungeons and raids. So, what stats are you after as an Outlaw Rogue? Well, there are two types, primary and secondary stats. Primary stats can be found on just about every piece of gear you equip, and secondary stats are more difficult to come across, but offer more bang for their buck. Your primary stats are agility, which increases your attack power and your chance to dodge, stamina, which increases your maximum health, and armor, which reduces the physical damage you take. Intellect and strength are useless for you. You don't want them. Since primary stats can be found very commonly on pieces of gear, don't worry about seeking them out. Generally, if a piece of gear has more of these primary stats on it and the item level is higher, it will generally be better for you. Secondary stats are where most of the customization occurs. You'll want to be using pieces of gear with secondary stats that mesh well with the Outlaw Rogue. Your secondary stats are Critical Strike, which increases your chance to critically strike, Haste, which increases your attack speed and increases your energy regeneration rate, Mastery, which for the Outlaw Rogue is Main Gauche, causing main hand attacks to have a chance, based upon your mastery, to trigger an attack with your offhand weapon, dealing additional damage and generating a little bit of energy, and Versatility, which increases the damage you deal and decreases the damage you take. For dealing damage, you're going to want to prioritize Versatility, then Critical Strike, then Mastery, and finally, Haste. These are only loose suggestions, and a bit of everything isn't going to hurt you, especially early on. Item level most of the time is going to beat secondary stats, but as you start gearing up into raids and Mythic Plus dungeons, you'll definitely need to consider secondary stats more. Now, enchanting and gemming your gear has changed in Legion. You can apply enchantments to your rings, your cloak, and your necklace, but not your weapon. The powerful enchantments that used to apply to weapons are instead on your necklace. Enchantments also come in multiple tiers. For instance, if you wanted to upgrade a ring with versatility, you could increase it by 150 with Word of Versatility, or by 200 with Binding of Versatility. So, to fine-tune your rogue to be as effective as possible, you'll want to use Binding of Versatility on both of your rings and Binding of Agility on your cloak. For your necklace, you'll want to use Mark of the Hidden Satyr, which has a chance to basically deal bonus damage when you attack. Remember, if you're doing any kind of raiding, you should be fully enchanted. It's practically mandatory for most raiding guilds. Enchant gear that you'll be keeping for a while and never enter a progression raid, where you're seeing new content for the first time, without enchantments. Granted, this is very expensive, so you might want to consider which pieces of gear you do and don't want to enchant while you're gearing up to get into raids. Gemming your gear remains much the same as it did in Warlords of Draenor. Gear has a chance to have a gem socket, and in those sockets you'll want to use a versatile Maelstrom Sapphire for 150 versatility. You'll also want to pick up a Saber's Eye. These are powerful epic gems that increase a primary stat, but you can only have one gem equipped in your gear at a time. Since you're a rogue, you'll want to have one Saber's Eye of Agility if you have a gem slot. To optimize yourself for a raid, you're also going to need 3 consumables. Flasks, which last for about an hour and aren't removed by death. Potions, which grant a short-lasting but powerful bonus with a cooldown that resets upon leaving combat. And food, which grants an hour-long buff after eating for 10 seconds. For your flask, use a Flask of the 7th Demon. For your potion, use a Potion of the Old War. You'll be using one potion right before combat begins to trigger its cooldown, and then another one mid-fight. For your food, stock up on seed-battered fish plates. But if you want to go one step further and have a food for every situation, also stock up on some fish brawl specials. You'll be using the fish brawl special for single target, since it scales with versatility, and the seed-battered fish plate for, well, everything else. To actually gear up for raids once you reach level 110, you're going to want to do, well, everything. Remember that every activity has a chance to drop good gear for you, so complete world quests, stay on top of your class order hall missions, enter level 110 dungeons and move on to heroic, mythic and mythic plus dungeons if you're really looking to up your gear. And remember that every raid reset, Tuesday for the US, Wednesday for the EU, you will get a piece of gear in your Grand Challengers bounty in your class order hall based upon the highest mythic plus dungeon you did last week. So always try and go as high as you can. This goes up to 10 and you don't have to beat the timer of a dungeon for it to count, you just have to finish it. That's another great way to gear up, especially once you start getting into raids. Finally, consider getting your hands on some crafted gear and upgrading it with Obliterum. Although it only goes up to item level 850 right now, this should increase as we go throughout the expansion. Item level isn't everything, and since you can decide what stats you want to upgrade by just either making lots of different crafted pieces or finding one you want on the auction house, you can make a really solid piece of gear for yourself using this method. There are lots of mechanics in play these days to gear up, and just remember that anything you do will help you gear up. You'll notice that I haven't mentioned artifact weapons yet. Don't worry, we'll be covering that next.
Blood and plunder!
Now, let's go over the Outlaw Rogue's talents and their artifact, the Dreadblades. Before we go over them, however, a word about how to swap talents. You can change specializations at any time, but talents require you to be in a rest area, like a city, a tavern, or your class hall, or your mind to be calmed using a personal tome of the Tranquil Mind, or an area of effect from a codex of the Tranquil Mind. These are made by scribes and can be bought on the auction house. When used, they allow for talent swapping for 1 minute, not 1 tome per talent. Now, for your talents. Rather than going into full detail about what each talent does, something you can easily do on your own by opening up your talent panel, let's go over some builds that will help you deal with various situations. Remember, swapping talents is recommended, so don't stick with only one build when entering different kinds of content. The first build is the soloing build, using Ghostly Strike for preparing big hits on enemies, Grappling Hook for supreme mobility between those enemies, Deeper Stratagem for huge hitting run-throughs, Iron Stomach for self-healing, Prey on the Weak for deadly stun locks, Cannonball Barrage for AoE burst, and Marked for Death for constant high combo point finishes. This build is great for world quests and leveling up. The second build is for pure single target damage, such as a raid boss. This one utilizes Ghostly Strike for bonus damage, Deeper Stratagem for bigger finishes, Alacrity for a near constant bloodlust on yourself once you've got it stacked up, and Marked for Death for burst moments or emergency re-rolling. This one is your typical single target build. The level 60 and 75 tiers aren't damage related, but I would definitely suggest you stick with Cheat Death when you're first going into new content so that if something hits you and it surprises you, you don't die. Once you know exactly what kind of damage you're going to be taking, Elusiveness may be better for you. The level 75 tier is all control related, so you can really just take what you want here. The third build here is for Area of Effect. The only changes from the single target build are the inclusiveness of Acrobatic Strikes, which not only makes it easier to melee things, but also extends the reach of Blade Flurry, making it easier to AoE. Just remember that you're sacrificing Grappling Hook for this, so if you find yourself in a situation where you're going to be moving long distances, you might still want to go with Grappling Hook. You'll also be using Cannonball Barrage here for large clumped up groups of enemies. This is the kind of build you'll want to look at for running dungeons, although consider swapping to Alacrity instead of Cannonball Barrage if you want more damage on bosses and if the trash lasts longer, so if you're on Mythic and Mythic Plus difficulties, that's what you'll probably want to go with. These are just example builds. Remember that you will construct your own builds depending upon what content you're doing. Keep your Tones of the Tranquil Mind well stocked, and you'll be able to adjust to what content you're doing and be as effective as possible. Now for your artifact, the Dreadblades. These swords, once forged by the Burning Legion to corrupt the pirates of the world and now wielded against them, act as a sort of second talent tree. You'll be using these weapons for the entirety of Legion, upgrading and empowering them as you play the game. You'll obtain them through a quest chain that you receive as soon as you reach Dalaran, at the start of the Broken Isles experience. Artifacts are unique to each specialization, and you can unlock different appearances by completing various achievements. They also feature hidden appearances and perks, so keep your eyes open for those. You'll be upgrading your artifact using Artifact Power, an experience bar for your weapon, basically. You'll gain Artifact Power by completing quests, looting treasures from exploration, completing dungeons and raids, finishing world quests, doing arenas, and, in essence, just playing the game. You'll be given items that, when used, grant Artifact Power to your currently equipped weapon. And when your artifact weapon's experience bar reaches full, you will be granted a trait point, and then the bar will reset. Trait points allow you to invest in the various perks available in your artifact tree, available by going to your Class Hall Forge. As you progress throughout Legion, you'll be able to commit Order resources into Artifact Knowledge work orders, which increases the amount of artifact power you gain from all sources for all of your specializations. This stacks up to 25, meaning that you'll start gaining insane amounts of artifact power as your knowledge stacks up. Each Artifact Knowledge work order takes a few days to complete, with some catch-up mechanics in play to help you out. In essence, you want to always have an Artifact Knowledge work order in progress. This will be necessary because at the later levels, getting new trait points takes a lot of artifact power. Alongside this, you have relics, items that you can receive much like artifact power. Relics can be uncommon, rare, epic, and will grant an increase to the artifact weapon's item level and statistics, and grant points in various artifact traits for free. These bonus points can cause a trait to go beyond their original limits, and even allow for a trait that has only one rank to increase in strength. For instance, you can go 4 out of 3 or 2 out of 1 when it comes to some traits, depending upon what your relic offers. Relics, however, do have limitations. Each relic has a type, such as Fel, Fire, Shadow, Arcane, Iron, Storm, Blood, etc., and artifact weapons have a limited amount of slots for each type of relic. For instance, the Dreadblades have 2, later upgraded to 3 relic slots, 1 Blood, 1 Iron, and 1 Storm. You cannot implant relics into your weapon that do not correspond to its slots, and replacing one relic with another will destroy the relic originally placed in the weapon. It is somewhat difficult for me to tell you what relics to aim for, but just remember that a higher item level for your weapon is always a good thing, and is going to be better than increasing one of your minor perks. When it comes to a side grade, so the item level for 2 different relics is the same, it depends upon the trait. Anything that lowers the energy costs of your abilities or increases the damage of your finishers is a good thing. Now, traits take a long time to unlock, and you'll spend the entire expansion leveling up your weapon and pouring points into its various traits. There's even a bonus trait available once you've unlocked all of the others that grants a small bonus that can be upgraded almost indefinitely. Traits are split up into ordinary traits, which offer small bonuses, and golden traits, which offer potentially game-changing power. To reach a trait, you must first unlock all ranks of a trait connected to it, meaning that what order you pour artifact power into your weapon is important. So, let's discuss the best way for you to invest your power. Your first trait, unlocked as soon as you pick up your artifact weapon, is Curse of the Dreadblades. After that, unlock Cursed Edges to open up the tree. After that, head into Fate's Thirst, then left into Fatebringer, then into Ghostly Shell. This leads you to your first golden trait, Greed. This gives run-through a chance to cause an area of effect that damages enemies and heals you, significantly increasing your damage. After that, head down into Hidden Blade to grant your next Saber Slash a guaranteed chance to strike an additional time after using Ambush. Then, head up into Blade Dancer, then into Fortune Strikes. After this, turn around and head into Gunslinger, then Deception, then Fortune's Strike, and into your second golden trait, Blunderbuss. Now your free pistol shots have a chance to have dramatically increased damage. After that, move back towards your second path and into Black Powder, then up into your final golden trait, Blurred Time. This causes Adrenaline Rush to increase the recovery speed of your cooldowns, which is a lovely little boon. Finally, pick up Fortune's Boon and then Blade Master to round out the tree. After that, you'll unlock Cursed Steel, which will allow you to pour a gigantic amount of artifact power into the Dreadblades for small, incremental increases to your damage. That's the kind of build you'll want to go for. Remember, this is only an example build for raiding. If you have different needs depending upon your goals, feel free to build however you'd like. Just remember that this is a long-term project that will take you a long time, I'm talking months, and refunding artifact power will set you back, so be careful about your choices.
Feed the fish, landlubber!
Now let's discuss your rotation. We'll start with single target, then discuss cleave rotations, area of effect, cooldowns, and your opener. Against a single enemy, your priority is to spend energy on combo point generators and get off massive run-throughs, while simultaneously maintaining great buffs from Roll the Bones. Your priority is as such. Maintain a Roll the Bones result that has at least 2 buffs, regardless of what those 2 buffs are. Cast Roll the Bones at 5 or more combo points until you have at least 2 buffs. Start re-rolling if the duration of your Roll the Bones buff is under about 10 seconds. If you're talented into it, make sure Ghostly Strike's debuff is always active on your target. Feel free to refresh it at about 5 seconds or less. If you're talented into it, use Marked for Death if you're at 0 to 1 combo points. Use Run Through if you're at 5 or more combo points. You don't want to overgenerate combo points with a double Saber Slash. Use Pistol Shot if you have Opportunity, which makes your next pistol shot free. And finally, use Saber Slash to generate combo points for yourself. That's your basic single target rotation. It revolves around maintaining Ghostly Strike and 2 or more Roll the Bones buffs, and then getting as many run-throughs out as possible. If you're using the Alacrity talent, you're going to want to maintain a good 20 stack of the buff for the entire fight, but just sticking to your foe and using finishers naturally will achieve this. Roll the Bones also affects this rotation. Getting a Broadsides roll for bonus combo points, for instance, will see you using Run Through at 4 combo points if you don't have a free pistol shot or a refreshing Ghostly Strike to use. This way you won't overgenerate 2 combo points with an accidental double Saber Slash. If you're using Death from Above, then use it as you would Run Through, but only if you're under 50 energy. During the animation, you'll be regenerating energy, and you don't want to cap and waste any. Remember that when Blade Flurry is active, the final strike of Death from Above will cleave. Just don't ever use Death from Above during Adrenaline Rush. You'll waste an absolute ton of energy, so it's better to just Run Through instead. If you're using Cannonball Barrage or Killing Spree, use them at the top of your priority rotation once you've got a good double buff of Roll the Bones. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's discuss your cleave rotation. When up against 2 targets, activate Blade Flurry and maintain Ghostly Strike on both targets. Aside from this, your rotation is unchanged. Just position yourself so that your strikes hit both targets, remembering that the Blade Flurry damage comes from you, not from the enemies you strike, and maintain your single target rotation. Moving on to your area of effect rotation. This revolves around Blade Flurry. Keep it active and focus entirely on getting as many run-throughs out as you can. If you're using Marked for Death, which you really should be, then focus on one target, the target with the least health, or the one that's going to die first. Then mark it, hit run through, and maintain your single target rotation. Just remember that if enemies are going to die quickly, you don't need to worry about getting Roll the Bones out there. For a short 10-second long AoE pull, just focus on Marked for Death and run-throughs with Blade Flurry active. Do this right and you can get some insane damage out by hitting Marked for Death, killing the marked target with run-through, and then repeating. Great times to do this are the Felbat Trash in Blackrook Hold and the Captain of the Naglfar in the Maw of Souls and the ads that he spawns. Now for your cooldowns. Your two big cooldowns are Curse of the Dreadblades and Adrenaline Rush. Curse of the Dreadblades causes Saber Slash and Pistol Shot to fill your combo point bar, and you lose health when you use finishers. Adrenaline Rush not only grants attack speed and energy regeneration for its duration, but very slightly lowers the global cooldown of your abilities, meaning that you'll be hitting your abilities faster. Now these two spells are begging to be used together, and you're going to want to try and achieve this as much as you can. But don't hold one for the other if you can't guarantee that you'll be able to combine them within about 10 seconds or so. It's still a damage increase to use them on cooldown rather than waiting 30 seconds to a minute for them to align. Naturally, save them for periods where you'll deal bonus damage to the boss, or you just need to kill something very quickly, and have them ready for your team's Bloodlust period. During Adrenaline Rush, you'll want to mostly be using Saber Slash and finishers, to avoid capping on energy and wasting any. But, barring amazing luck or extremely high gear, you'll still run low on energy during this time, so feel free to throw in a free pistol shot if you're at low energy, at around 35 or so. The best way to combine Adrenaline Rush and Curse of the Dreadblades is to hold onto a true bearing buff, even if it's your only buff, and get finishers out to line your Adrenaline Rush cooldown with your Curse of the Dreadblades cooldown. Once you've achieved that, you can happily start re-rolling for 2 buffs again. We'll discuss Roll the Bones in a bit more detail in the tips and tricks section. Now for your opener. Let's assume a basic 10-second pull timer, and that you're using a recommended single target build that includes Ghostly Strike, Deeper Stratagem, and Marked for Death. Get in range of your target before the pull timer begins. About 10 seconds before the pull, use Marked for Death, and then afterwards, use Tricks of the Trade on one of the tanks, whichever one's pulling. Right before the pull begins, at about 2 seconds remaining depending on when your tank prefers to pull, use Roll the Bones and your potion. This will put the potion on cooldown so you can use it again mid-fight. Thanks to your Ruthlessness passive, you'll be at 1 combo point. As the fight begins, open with Ambush. You'll be at 3 combo points. Immediately afterwards, use Ghostly Strike. This will put you up to 4 combo points. There will be a short pause as you regenerate up to 50 energy. As soon as that happens, hit Saber Slash. If you've unlocked the Hidden Blade trait in your artifact weapon, this Saber Slash will have a guaranteed chance to hit a second time, granting you 5, then 6 combo points. If your initial Roll the Bones granted you 2 or more buffs, you're good to use Run Through at this point and go into your cooldowns. But if your initial roll didn't grant you 2 or more buffs, use Roll the Bones again. After that, activate all of your cooldowns. Curse of the Dreadblades, Adrenaline Rush, any on-use trinkets, and your racials. For the 12-second duration of Dreadblades, your goal is to Saber Slash, Finisher, and repeat. The finisher will depend upon whether you got 2 or more buffs from Roll the Bones, or you didn't. If you at any point get 2 or more buffs, your finisher should be Run Through. If not, keep rolling. You have about a 35% chance to get 2 buffs, so it should happen fairly quickly. This is just a loose ruling, it's not 100% because of the way this all works, which we'll go into more detail in the tips and tricks section, but this should be a good starting point for you. Once your Curse of the Dreadblades ends, return to your default rotation. That is your opener. Now let's put this all together. In the next clip, I'm just going to stop talking and show you what the opener and about a minute or so of DPS with the Outlaw Rogue is like. Let's go! Now let's discuss your macros and add-ons. You don't need these to master your rogue, but they will be very helpful. Let's start with a macro that casts Tricks of the Trade on your focus target. You can get into the habit of making your tank your focus target at the start of every dungeon or raid, and then use this macro to quickly cast the spell on them. Nice and easy. The other macro I would suggest is the Button. This is a macro that will cast all of your cooldowns, so Curse of the Dreadblades, Adrenaline Rush, your trinkets, and your racial ability all at the same time. These macros can be found in the description for easy copy and pasting. As for add-ons, I would definitely suggest WEAKAURAS. This add-on lets you do just about everything, and it's extremely in-depth. I can't explain it in detail in this video, but I do have another video dedicated to creating and using WEAKAURAS. In the description, you can find my links to my WEAKAURAS as well. To import them, just open up WEAKAURAS, hit New, then Import, then paste the wall of text that you've copied. You'll get a pop-up window, and then, once you've hit Confirm, you'll get a copy of my WEAKAURAS. Other add-ons I would suggest are a good cast bar add-on, unit frames, and action bars, and even a replacement for the inbuilt nameplates if you would prefer. You don't need to use these, but if you want to tinker with your user interface, then you can find links on screen and in the description to my beginner's guide to the user interface. I'm not going to go into too much depth here, since there's loads of stuff you can do with user interfaces and it's a very deep subject. So for now, let's move on.
Ha! This guy's toast.
Now let's discuss some tips and tricks for mastering your rogue. First of all, a simple tip: you are a melee class. That might sound dumb, but remember that a portion of your damage is going to stem from your white hits, otherwise known as your basic attacks, or auto attacks. To continue to hit your foe, you're going to need to be in melee range. Keep this in mind at all times. Are you in range of your enemy? Keep in mind how the fight is going to work and keep your situational awareness at a maximum. How will the enemy move because of the tank's movements? How fast are they going to move? Do you need to use sprint or grappling hook to keep yourself in melee range for as long as possible? If you're not in range, you're not dealing damage, so always be in melee range. And remember that enemies can parry your attacks if you attack from in front of them. That means that the attack will deal no damage. This counts for both white hits and your special attacks, which you really don't want. So if you can, sometimes you won't be able to, but if you can, stay behind your target at all times. A 90-degree cone behind them is generally your safe spot for dealing damage as a melee class. Next up, a few mechanic-specific tips. Let's start with Ambush and Vanish combined with the Hidden Blade artifact trait. If you have this one, and it's not too difficult to get if you're following the path suggested earlier in this video, then you can use Vanish, Ambush, and then Saber Strike mid-fight to generate 5 combo points in a row very quickly. So simply wait until you're at about 55 energy, hit Vanish, Ambush immediately afterwards, then use Saber Strike and hit your free pistol shot. You can use this for a quick reroll of Roll the Bones or another run through when an enemy is about to die. Now let's discuss Roll the Bones itself. This is the staple of the Outlaw Rogue, and it can offer you up to 6 buffs. Let's discuss how each one changes how you play. First of all, Jolly Roger for a higher chance of striking with Saber Strike twice. You need to take this bonus chance into consideration when you're at 5 combo points. Saber Slash is never a good idea to cast at 5, as the potential for overgenerating is always present. With Jolly Roger, this chance is increased, so either refresh Ghostly Strike if the duration is low, use a free pistol shot if you have one, or simply use a finisher at 5 combo points. This will generate more damage over the course of a fight than overgenerating combo points with a double Saber Slash. Secondly, Grand Melee, granting attack speed and leech. Thankfully, you don't need to think about this one too much, but remember that this will stack with Adrenaline Rush and any racial abilities and trinkets, and with Bloodlust. Although you won't be fishing for this roll, remember to stay in melee range even more when you have Grand Melee. I just want to reiterate it here. Faster attack speed means more attacks missed out on if you end up out of range, even a little bit. Shark-infested waters, granting increased critical strike chance, also involves practically no playstyle change from you. Buried Treasure doesn't need any big changes in style either. Just remember that you'll cap energy faster if you stop spending energy at a fairly constant rate, and capping on energy is just as bad as over-generating combo points, since any additional energy generated is lost. So keep an eye on your energy bar. You'll be using abilities more frequently with Buried Treasure active. Broadsides, causing combo point generators to generate an additional combo point, is a big one to think about. You're going to want to keep an eye on your combo points during the duration of this buff. With it, a single Saber Slash proccing a copy of itself can generate 4 combo points. So if you're above 4 in this case, don't use Saber Slash. You're going to over-generate combo points even more. Just use your finishers at 4. You'll get more finishers off in general if you do this than if you would go up to 5 or 6 combo points and over-generate. Finally, True Bearing. This is the single biggest point of contention when it comes to using Roll the Bones. Being able to reduce the cooldown on most of your abilities by up to 12 seconds per finisher can be huge. When Adrenaline Rush and Curse of the Dreadblades are used in tandem with this roll, you can reduce the cooldowns of your various abilities by a good 60 seconds during the 12-second duration of Curse of the Dreadblades. This is a potent buff. Also, when you roll True Bearing, the Roll the Bones cast that triggered the cooldown reduction will itself reduce your cooldowns, so keep that in mind as well. So in general, this buff is going to get you to your cooldowns faster, and that's going to change how you play. To properly explain it, let's discuss Roll the Bones more in general. So your main goal with Roll the Bones is to get 2 or more buffs. It doesn't matter which buffs you get as long as you get 2 or more. Once you've got them, the general rule is to keep them until they're about to run out. Then re-roll until you get 2 or more buffs again. But this isn't always the case. You need to think on your feet with Roll the Bones. It rewards clever usage and fishing, and punishes strict adherence to rules. So, let's say you're in a dungeon and you've just finished killing a boss. All of your cooldowns have been used, and you're on the trash up to the next boss. You have anywhere between 1 to 5 minutes until you reach the next boss, and you want Adrenaline Rush to be ready for it. But what if you get a cooldown reduction roll? Well, that changes things. At this point, you'll be spending combo points on finishers until you are fairly comfortable re-rolling for 2 buffs again, doing the trash like normal, but also making sure that your cooldowns are ready for the next boss. But what happens if you reach the trash and you get a 2 buff roll and one of them is cooldown reduction? This way, your Adrenaline Rush might be ready a couple of minutes before the next boss. You need to make a judgment call here. Are you confident enough in your ability to get enough finishers out to reduce the cooldown of your Adrenaline Rush to the point where it's ready for the next boss? This comes into consideration when you're in a raid fight as well. You want to use your cooldowns at certain points in the fight, but what about when you get a cooldown reduction roll? Can you get your Adrenaline Rush's cooldown lowered enough to use it now and then again when you originally planned? These are things you're going to need to play by ear, and the best way to figure this out is practice and experience. Whenever you get a cooldown reduction roll on trash and Adrenaline Rush is available, just try hitting it. See how much you can reduce the cooldown by before the next boss. This will depend on your damage, the damage of other group and raid mates, how the tank and healer pull and pause, and where you are in a dungeon or what point of a raid encounter you're in. Like I said, a strict rules system here is going to screw you over, so play it fluidly to get the most out of your cooldowns. This goes both ways. Sure, 2 buffs is great, but there are going to be situations where Lady Luck will turn her back on you, and you'll roll over and over and over and over and over and over and over again to try and get 2 buffs, and at this point you're probably ready to rip your monitor in half because you're going, this isn't a 35% chance! Trust me, I've done it as well. Consider if re-rolling like this is worth it. In most situations, sure, it's probably going to be, but what if you're in the last 20 seconds of a fight? What if the trash is about to die? Re-rolling, remember, is an attempt to buff the damage that you are going to do. Sometimes you're going to need damage right now, immediately. Again, play this by ear. If something is about to die, run it through. Don't just sit there spamming Roll the Bones and wasting valuable damage. Run through is a huge portion of your damage, and if you just sit there spamming Roll the Bones, you'll just end up with a great buff and nothing to kill. On top of this, you are really not going to want to Roll the Bones very often during a Curse of the Dreadblades or an Adrenaline Rush. Again, so much damage comes from run through that at some point you're just going to want to go, screw it, and just start hitting run through instead. For me, when I activate all my cooldowns and I've got Curse of the Dreadblades and Adrenaline Rush active, I go for 3 rolls. If I don't get those 3 rolls, I just say screw it, I go with what I have, and then I start re-rolling once my cooldowns are done. The last note I have about Roll the Bones is to consider its duration. You want the duration to be nice and long right before you're about to hit your cooldowns. During the course of Curse of the Dreadblades, some buffs like Buried Treasure, True Bearing, Shark-Infested Waters, and Grand Melee will be great, but Jolly Roger and Broadsides won't have any impact. So consider re-rolling right before using your cooldowns if you aren't happy with your current buffs combined with said cooldowns. Just be careful about overdoing this. Eventually you're going to have to take the plunge and just start dealing damage. Like I said, I can't give you a solid rule for this. Use your common sense, practice, and remember that your role is to deal damage, not buff yourself. On screen now, you can see a screenshot taken from Stjern's Legion Rogue overview. It shows the damage per second of the various double buffs you can get. JR is Jolly Roger, GM is Grand Melee, SIW is Shark-Infested Waters, TB is True Bearing, BT is Buried Treasure, and BS is Broadsides. As you can see, your best double roll, if you really do want to fish, is Broadsides and True Bearing for tons of cooldown reduction. But remember, don't overdo this, it can be very detrimental. Right, that's enough about Roll the Bones. Next, let's have a quick discussion about energy and energy capping. So, depending upon your haste, whether or not you've rolled an energy buff, and if you have Adrenaline Rush active, your energy is going to be moving at various speeds. You're going to want to avoid capping it at any time, as you can't spend energy that you overgenerate. For this reason, during moments where you're regenerating energy at a rate similar to your rate of spending it, like when you have Adrenaline Rush up during Bloodlust, ignore your free pistol shots. The global cooldown will just cap your energy, and it's better to just get those extra saber slashes out instead, even if you get a proc and waste your free pistol shot. You'll generally always have that free pistol shot ready for when you get low on energy anyway. Generally, when I've got all my cooldowns up, I only use my free pistol shot if I'm at around 30 energy. And the global cooldown after that free pistol shot normally gets me up to 60 or 70 energy, right where you want to be while you use your cooldowns. My next tip is to pre-pot. It is so important. Potions are expensive right now, yes, but using a potion right before a pull begins to trigger the 1-minute cooldown so that you can use it alongside your cooldowns is great. Come to every raid with flasks of the 7th demon and loads of potions, enough for 2 potions per pull. Get yourself some Defiled Augment runes to totally maximize your damage on fights where it's super important and your raid team is almost there. Every bit of damage counts, and raid leaders will notice this. Next, know how fights work so that you have something ready for every single burst of damage. I'm just going to say this. A great rogue never dies. You have so many ways of avoiding damage and death. Feint halves the area of effect damage you take. Cloak of Shadows makes you immune to most raid mechanics. Cheat Death is a great staple to take in every fight because not dying is the best. You can and should be using these abilities to help your raid team mitigate mechanics. Use Grappling Hook and Cloak of Shadows to deposit Nythendra's Rot mechanic in a corner with minimal downtime. Use Sprint to counteract Eleretha Renfarel's pushback, combined with Feint to take half damage from it. Use Riposte to survive fixating Nightmare Ickers on the Il'gynoth fight. Use Cloak of Shadows, Sprint, and Grappling Hook to clear Bramble Patches on Cenarius. These are just small examples. You have something for almost every situation, so use it. Don't forget to swig your Crimson Vial whenever you take bursts of damage to help your healers, and have some healing potions as well. Combining a Crimson Vial with a healing potion will get you to almost full health. All of these will help turn you into becoming a master of surviving damage and dishing it out in spades. Next up, your food. It can be a bit confusing right now because of simulations, but consider this. Fish Brawl Special is very reliant on luck to be effective, and it will be outshone by pure versatility food, so the Seed Battered Fish Plate, in multi-target fights. So take this into consideration as you go through the different raids. Next, your role as a rogue. A good rogue does high damage. A great rogue will never die and do high damage. A fantastic rogue will never die, deal great damage, and help their raid out. Offer yourself and your great utility abilities to help your raid deal with mechanics. Some suggestions I would have are interrupting the Deathglare tentacles on Il'gynoth, Heart of Corruption, with Kick, constantly. When the Nightmare Ickers on Il'gynoth group up, use Cloak of Shadows right before they die to avoid their damage and keep dishing it out. Cloak might not remove some debuffs like Nythendra's Rot or Elaretha Renfreil's Tornadoes and Venom, but it will make you immune to the damage of those abilities, so you can stack up pulls and generally react faster and take more risks because you've got Cloak helping you out. Use Feint whenever there's any kind of AoE. Whenever Elaretha Renfreil uses Vile Ambush, for instance, hit your Feint. When soaking Ursoc's charge, use Feint to help survive the damage from both the charge and the AoE after it. Use Cloak of Shadows on the Dragons of Nightmare's Volatile Infection. Use Tricks of the Trade to get adds to your tanks on the Cenarius and Elaretha Renfreil fights, and just generally use all of your mechanics as much as you possibly can. Again, these are just examples. Consider what you can do in each fight to help your raid team out as much as possible. Finally, my last piece of advice, remember that you are a pure damage class. You have 3 different specializations that all play differently, and at some point during the expansion, one is going to be better than others in certain situations. For instance, as of this video's release, when Mythic Emerald Nightmare has just opened up, Assassination is better on pure single-target fights, Subtlety is better on fights where there's a lot of adds, and Outlaw is great on trash and just in general. All of the specializations are really close right now, so keep an eye on resources like the Rogue Discord and the Ravenholdt website for updates. Both of these links, alongside Stjern's document, are all available in the description. Oh, and remember, have some fun. Master this game if you can, but remember that you're here for fun. That will conclude this guide. I hope you enjoyed it and you found it helpful. If you have any questions, thoughts, comments, or suggestions, then you can contact me using the links in the description, or you can just leave a comment. If you want to help support the channel, then there's a link to my Patreon page in the description as well. Thank you very much for watching, and I wish you the best of luck as the Outlaw Rogue.